Dawn peeled the night off the plains in strips of silver and rose, the way a breeze peels mist from the surface of a river. Emily ran her usual circuit along the boundary track, breath steady, boots whispering through dew-heavy grass. The reserve's big lake lay ahead, an oval of pewter framed by fever trees. Dragonflies stitched light over the water. In the distance, a dazzle of zebras grazed so loosely that they looked like brushstrokes someone had forgotten to finish. She slowed as a sound threaded into the music in her headphones, thin, high, and wrong. She pulled the headphones down to her neck. The sound came again, a needling, wet squeal from the reeds where the lake curled into a muddy inlet. Emily vaulted the low log barrier and waded thigh-deep through floating lilies. The mud tugged at her calves. Another cry, weaker now. She parted a curtain of papyrus and saw it. A zebra foal, no bigger than a medium dog, all legs in panic, half sunk in a sludge pocket. It thrashed and slid deeper. Peat black water coated its stripes until they were smudges of gray, as if someone had rubbed charcoal across white paper. Easy, Emily said, kneeling. Hey, little one, easy now. She scanned the high grass for the mother, for the herd. Nothing. Only a pied kingfisher stalled in the air, watching her with that impersonal hunt stare birds carry from birth. The foal's eyes rolled, whites flashing. Emily shrugged out of her running top and twisted it hard into a rope. She looped the fabric around the foal's chest under a foreleg and planted her boots. The mud made a sucking sound, something between a kiss and a threat. She leaned back and pulled. The foal kicked, slid, sank, and bleated, a raw infant sound that clenched something behind Emily's ribs. She eased, steadied, pulled again. Inch by inch, the little body came free until with a slurp, pop, the lake surrendered it and both of them pitched backward into the shallows. Got you, Emily panted. Got you. The foal's breathing rattled. Its ears were ice. Emily cradled its head and rubbed along the rib cage with open palms, pushing water out of the lungs the way she'd been taught with antelope calves and, once, a wild donkey. The foal coughed, trembled, and coughed again. Weak air brushed her wrist. She flicked, her radio on. Base, this is Emily at the North Lake Inlet. I need a field kit and a sling. Neonate zebra, hypothermic, near drowning. Copy, said Kelvin, the reserve's on-duty vet. Sypho's with me, ETA 6 minutes. Emily wrapped the foal in her spare windbreaker. The slick coat was warm where life still pushed from the inside, cold where the lake had tried to take it. Up close, the stripes were strangely intimate, thin as pencil lines at the face, wider across the flanks, twisting in unique little eddies over the haunches. No two the same, Kelvin always said. The way fingerprints are, no two the same. Stay with me, she whispered, rubbing small circles under the shoulder blade. You've got a whole life to outrun. The pickup growled into view. Sypho hopped down with the sling while Kelvin knelt, stethoscope already in his ears. Lungs are wet, he said, but we've seen worse. Good body score for a newborn. Kelvin lifted the tail, checked, smiled faintly. She's a tough one. They bundled the foal into the truck and layered heat packs under the blankets. In the clinic, Kelvin threaded a catheter and started warm fluids. Emily massaged the limbs and talked, a steady murmur that sounded silly to her own ears and right to the foal's flicking ears. After 20 minutes, the breathing smoothed into something like rhythm. The foal blinked, sneezed, and made a tiny, indignant sound as if registering a complaint with the universe. She'll make it, Kelvin said. Hypothermia is the main dragon here. Once we get the core up, she'll remember she's made of spring-loaded legs and bad decisions. Sypho laughed. She already looks like the kind who will give her mother gray hairs. Emily stroked the damp forelock. Let's find that mother first. A mare will have moved off to foal. Maybe the herd spooked. Maybe she's out there circling back. She'll be looking. Outside, the air warmed to honey. Emily entered the reeds again, this time with Sypho and a pair of field binoculars. They found hoof prints along the inlet's edge, small, delicate half-moons pressed over larger ones. Some dragged where panic had scrambled for purchase. On a muddy shelf, there was a scuffle of prints in the deep belly press smear where the foal had slid. A heavier set of tracks overlapped them, wider, sharper, Not zebra, not antelope. Hippo? No, claws. Emily squatted, touched a print, and felt it in the bone. Crocodile, she said quietly. Sifo nodded. The mare bolted. That cry would bring teeth. Emily stood and scanned the grassland. In the splay of acacias to the east, dust drifted up and flattened in the sun. It looked like breath on glass. She lifted the binoculars. Stripes flickered. The old optical trick that fooled lions and mathematicians both. A stallion stood like a slope of muscle carved from smoke, head high, neck black as spilled ink. Behind him, 4 mares. One trailed small, awkward steps. The mare turned, searching the air with her nose the way grief searches a room for the person who's left it. Got them, Emily said. 3 kilometers east-southeast. Let's go. They loaded the foal into a transport crate padded thick with towels and drove across the plains at a pace between urgency and respect. The dazzle moved often when predators prowled. Sometimes a herd cut surprising loops through country it had known for generations, driven by old maps in the blood. Kelvin stayed behind to monitor the radios and the lake. Crocs were patient, and the lake held its own rules. They cut the engine 500 meters from the herd and let the quiet spill back. The stallion saw them and blew through his nostrils, an unamused sound like sand on tin. Emily climbed down and opened the crate's gate. The foal wobbled, eyes wide. Sun turned every droplet on its lashes into sequins. Smell her, Emily whispered to the wind. Hear her. The foal whickered, thin and hopeful. The mare's head snapped up. For a fraction of a second, there was nothing on her face, no recognition, no calculation, only the blank electricity of the moment before lightning. Then she screamed, a high, bright sound that rippled through Emily like an answer, and ran, and the foal ran, and the distance between what had almost been lost and what was found disappeared, as if a hand had wiped it off the world. The herd closed around them, a moving fence of bodies and breath. The stallion fixed Emily and Sifo with a long, displeased look, and then, because even vigilant kings must attend their own, turned to nudge the reunited pair, blowing hot air over damp stripes. The mare lowered her head and drummed her chin along the foal's back, as if counting stripes she already knew by heart. Emily's eyes prickled. She put her hand over her mouth and let the feeling pass through without apology. The first reunion is always a small miracle. What follows is the longer one. Survival. They left the crate and walked back to the backy. Behind them, the dazzle flowed forward, a tide cut into alternating light and dark. The foal bumped the mare's side, still finding its land legs. It glanced once toward the humans, ears forward, inscrutable, and then forgot them entirely in the work of growing. By noon, the air hung hot over the plains, and the radio chewed with routine. Fence check on the west boundary, rhino cow with calf on the river road, a tourist group delayed by a flatted tire. Emily's report lived in the clinic computer now, short and understated the way all the good ones were. Neonate zebra extracted from Mud Inlet, warmed and stabilized. Returned to herd at 10:58. Photographic documentation attached. In the photo, the mare's eyes were half closed in a moment that read as sleep if you didn't know it was relief. The full striped forehead looked printed from fresh ink. You're keeping that one for your wall, Sifo said, leaning over Emily's shoulder. Emily smiled. For the board, the wall comes later. She meant the corkboard in the operations room where they pinned moments that shouldn't have worked but did. A pangolin's looped tail uncoiling from a snare. A cheetah with heeled pads sprinting again. A rhino's face turned toward a dehorned future it did not choose, breathing all the same. The board was a weather station for morale. On heavy days, it was a lighthouse. Did you see the stallion's scar? Sifo asked. Left flank, old lion bite. I saw, Emily said. He carries it like a medal he never wanted. He'll move them up onto the ridge tonight. Better sight lines, less croc fear. I'll leave a camera trap along the contour. If they stay a few days, we'll see if the little one keeps up. She will. Emily thought of the cough catching into breath under her hands. She owes that lake a lifetime of avoidance. They laughed, and for an hour the day was ordinary again. Forms, feed rations, a call with a farmer about a broken gate on the north boundary. Ordinary on a reserve is a form of grace. It means life is doing life without your urgent intervention. Late afternoon, clouds shouldered up over the distant hills. The air sharpened. A single drop pinged the clinic roof like a coin striking a bell. The radio ticked once. "Ops, this is Kelvin. Heads up. The croc we saw this morning is cruising the inlet. Tour guides flagged it. Keep foot traffic off the peninsula." "Copy," Emily said. The memory of cold mud pulled at her ankles. "We're hanging a sign and a rope right now." They worked until the rain stitched itself into a proper downpour and the earth's spine exhaled. Lightning made white rooms in the sky, empty and echoing. When the storm passed, the world smelled reset. That night, Emily dreamt of stripes that moved when she wasn't looking, and the sound of a mare screaming not from fear, but from the sudden undoing of it. Days stacked into a week. Camera traps clicked and traded their small secrets to the server. The dazzle lingered on the ridge and then drifted toward the shallow pans that filled after the storm. The foal bucked at sacred nothing, discovered its legs were loaded with joy and could spend it recklessly. The stallion patrolled the periphery, that old soldier's scar puckered against the ribs, eye on the wind. Emily and Sifo watched from a respectful distance, trying to be the kind of caretakers who do not mistake their watching for ownership. At dusk one evening, they found a spray of lion prints over the road, pads as big as spoon bowls. In the spinney to the left, a half-gnawed impala kill, drag marks smoothing the dust like a giant had pushed a hand across it. Life eating life, not cruelty, just the math of it. "Let's not deliver any more foals to the lake," Sifo murmured, and Emily nodded, thinking of crocodiles waiting without malice for the mistakes of the young. A call came the next morning. A safari vehicle had seen a zebra mare limping. Emily and Sifo rolled out, skylarks pouring their names into blue air, tires humming the kind of song only bush tracks know. They found her in a drainage swale, not their mare, but one with a left hind pastern swollen to the circumference of a fist. A snare buried under dust and fear. The foal beside her was maybe 2 weeks older than the little one they'd returned. It stamped and stared, ferocious in a way only very small things can be. Emily kept her voice low and even, as if talking to water. Kelvin arrived with the dart gun, the quiet hiss of the anesthetic, the clean, brutal kindness of cutting wire out of skin. They cleaned, flushed, injected, waited. The mare dozed, skin twitching with phthisis, breath a slow piston. When she rose, she tested the leg and then walked as if the earth had given 2 centimeters back to her life. They watched her limp into a wedge of shade and considered the tangled ways a reserve intersects with the world beyond its fences. The poacher's wire that probably fed a family somewhere. The trucked-in tourists whose fees kept the anti-poaching unit funded. The rangers who slept lightly and rose when called. The math was messy. The math on good days added up. That night, the dazzle with their recovered foal came down to drink at the pan near the research blind. Emily climbed the blind's ladder and settled onto the abraded wood. Moonlight lacquered the world. Stripes slid and folded. The lake did what lakes do when the wind is gone. Remembered what it once reflected and tried to be that, glass still and forgiving. The foal drank and sneezed water back out in a spray, surprised by its own nose. The mare nosed her flank where mud had once tried to erase her. The stallion held his silhouette against the dark opal of the sky, imperfect and powerful, flawed and perfect. "Some nights," Emily whispered, to the mare, the moon herself, "we get to keep what we love." A jackal barked from the far shore. In the reeds, the small sound of something making a private decision it had to live with. Somewhere, a crocodile slid off a sandbank with the grace of a fallen star. On the 10th day after the rescue, an email from the reserve's data team pinged into Emily's inbox. Subject, Stripe Match Beta. Months earlier, they'd partnered with a university lab to test a pattern recognition algorithm that matched zebra stripe maps across images. The theory was clean. If stripes are unique, you can track individuals the way you track leopards through rosette patterns or whales by fluke scars. The practice was messier because grass gets in the way and zebras refuse to hold still. Attached were 3 images. The first was a still from the camera trap on the ridge, the foal cantering behind the mare. The second was a still from the pan at night. The third was the photo Sifo had taken of the reunion. Stripe Match had drawn thin, green outlines over 3 places on the foal's coat, a forked pattern at the base of the neck, a swirl on the right flank, a little zigzag above the hawk, and labeled them with a confidence score that made Emily grin like a child, 0.93. The computer agreed with the heart. It was the same foal, growing, alive. She printed the images and pinned them to the board. The stable hands clapped when they saw them. Kelvin pretended not to be sentimental and failed. "What are you naming her?" he asked. Not because rangers were supposed to name wild things, but because sometimes you cannot help it. "Not we," Emily said. "But me, privately, I keep calling her Inkling because of the stripes, like a first idea that won't let go." Inkling. He rolled it in his mouth. Fitting. She started as a smudge in the water and wrote herself into the story. Trouble came on a bright midday that smelled of warm dust and crushed wild mint. It came without malice and therefore without warning. Painted Oz, quartering the grass with that efficient, joyful trot that looked like a dance and ended with death more often than not. They were a large pack, 15, maybe 20, ears like black-edged flags, mottled coats dissolving into landscape until only motion gave them away. Emily was already nearby, checking the long drop gate that funneled migrating animals away from a road. She radioed Sifo and Kelvin. Voices overlapped. Plans sprang and snapped into place. Painted dogs are protected here. Zebras are not under the same blade that rhinos live beneath, but they are the breathing economy of the plains. This is not a story about choosing one life over another. It is a story about friction between predators and prey, mediated by humans who wish, perversely and sincerely, for both to live well. Emily eased the Land Cruiser between the herd and the advancing pack, not to rescue the zebras outright, they had legs for that, but to add a moving obstacle the dogs would prefer not to puzzle around. The stallion screamed once. The herd bunched, then flowed left, then exploded forward in the clean geometric panic that keeps lineage alive. The dogs fanned out. Two tried to cut the foal from the mare. Emily idled forward, not chasing, simply being in a place that made lines awkward. The mare swerved and the foal clung. For a moment the world was only dust and stripes and staccato breath. Then a dog saw easier prey, a warthog piglet with the tragic habit of pausing to consider its options. And the pack hooked right, fluid as spilled oil, and vanished. Silence refilled the world. The foal tossed its head as if to declare victory or shake off terror. The stallion stamped and looked at Emily with a comprehension she was careful not to romanticize. He didn't thank her. He placed her on his map of tolerable dangers and then set that map on fire, because his job wasn't to curate gratitude. It was to stand between sharp teeth and tender ribs until his heart burned out. Emily rolled the window down. "I know," she said softly. "I know." Weeks passed. Grass toughened and yellowed. The lake dropped its shoulder and slid inward. The foal became a not-quite foal, legs less ridiculous, gaze less baby-open and more zebra-wary. She learned to sleep standing, to startle without losing the threat of grazing, to accept that the stallion's shadow could mean safety or scolding depending on wind and mood. On a morning that had the feel of a page about to turn, Emily arrived at the operations room to find a new notice pinned under the striped photos. It was a map, old and patched, showing a migration corridor resurrected from a pre-fence era when herds moved like weather. A consortium had bought land to stitch broken habitat back together, a seam from this reserve to the next and beyond. The corridor would let the dazzles carve old paths again, to water that didn't taste like the memory of crocodiles, to grasses that hadn't yet met their teeth. Sifo stood beside her, coffee steaming. "It's happening," he said, voice soft with the kind of awe that makes grown men look briefly like boys. "The world sometimes goes in the right direction." Emily touched the drawn line, then glanced at the photos. The little zigzag above the hawk was larger now, simply because the hawk was larger. "Good," she said. "They deserve distance." Distance is the zebra's gun, distance from lions, from snares, from the lake's patient greenmouth. Distance to run, distance to make more distance. Emily went out to patrol. Newton found her on a rise looking down at the ridge where they had once set a camera and prayed into a lens. Below, the herd moved with the same ordinary grace, counting their living the way hooves count steps. The not-quite-foal trotted, paused, looked north. The mare looked north. The stallion lifted his head and orientated not to danger, but to the idea of a way. Thunder grumbled from a mountain that held its weather like a secret. The first drops fell, turning dust into dark polka dots that disappeared when there were too many to name. The zebras moved into the curtain of rain, stripes turning from high-contrast poetry into something subtler, a whispered stanza. They slipped over the ridge and down the far side toward country that remembered them and would, if granted the chance, remember them again and again. Emily stood in the rain until her hair lay in soaked ropes and her shirt clung cold to her spine. She thought of that first morning, the thin cry of the rope of cloth, the weight of a life in her arms, and then of this moment, which was less dramatic and more perfect. Some rescues happen only once in the span of an hour. Others happen for months, then for years, then over a lifetime. You pull a foal from a lake, you advocate for a corridor, you teach a student ranger to tell crocodile prints from hippo. You learn to love what will never thank you and to be thanked in ways that have nothing to do with you. On the way back, she stopped at the board. She added one more photo, a shot from the morning's patrol, distant, rain-muted, the herd mid-slope. The foal, no, the yearling now, was a blur behind the mare, joy folding her spine into a comma. Emily captioned it with a thin black marker. She kept running. Then she hung her wet jacket on the peg, took a long drink of water, and went out again, into a world that always needed more miles.